be in the centre left. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Nigel Farage, MEP.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, and good evening, everybody. This is going to be the single most important vote any of you will have in your lifetimes. If we vote to remain in the European Union, we will never get another opportunity. Now, we're the second week in, and I can scarcely believe the stuff the Prime Minister and the Chancellor and many others are coming out with. We're being told millions of jobs are at risk, trade would cease, the sky would fall in, anybody living in Spain will be rounded up and sent back on a plane, and the Chancellor even got the G20 to say there'd be a global economic shock if Britain left the European Union. Quite how 16 of those countries in the G20 have managed to become as big and successful as they are outside the wonders of the European Union is quite beyond me. They fired every bullet they've got. You're probably going to hear next, plague and pestilence will descend upon our country if we leave. I spent 20 years before getting into politics working in international trade, buying and selling and shipping commodities, copper mostly, around the world. Trade and politics are actually two rather different things. We'll argue tonight about economics, and Vernon will say we'd be better off staying in, and I'm going to say very strongly we'd be better off staying out. But actually, what this referendum is really all about is one very simple question you've all got to ask yourselves. Do you want us to be an independent nation that makes its own laws, has its own Supreme Court, controls its own borders, makes its own decisions, and makes its own trade deals? Or do you want us to be part of a political union with a flag, an anthem, and ambitions to become a state in its own right? Do you wish to be a self-governing, independent nation or not? That is at the heart of this referendum, and I think we did pretty well for 1,000 years before we joined the common market, and that the best people to govern this country are us through the ballot box. Thank you.
Okay, Vernon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark. What a fantastic turnout of people, and thanks to everyone who's made this possible. Let me start by saying it's also great to see so many young people here, because this decision will define the way in which our country will go over the next generation and the generation after that. And I was just interested in listening to what Nigel said, because you can take the view that Nigel has just taken, but I have a much more positive view of Europe than that, and a much more confident view of our own independent country within the European Union than that. So there are very real risks, and I'll point out to them, and we'll hear from Nigel how he answers that. It's not unreasonable to point out that 1 in 8 jobs in Northern Ireland are related to trade with the EU, £3.6 billion. It's not unreasonable to point out that 9,000 businesses are related to or relate to the trade that Northern Ireland conducts with the European Union, and that Northern Ireland is much more dependent on exports to the European Union than the rest of the UK. And we're back to Nigel to understand. He mentioned already in his opening remarks about controlling borders and freedom of movement. We will have to answer the question of what that means within the context of Northern Ireland. But let me say this, because this is my pitch to you, more than any of all of those things. I'm proud of being a part of the UK, and so is Northern Ireland, whilst the majority of people in Northern Ireland want it. But it is also about saying that we can be sovereign, but we can also achieve a lot more by pooling that sovereignty together and working with other countries in Europe to defend ourselves where necessary against crime, but also to work together to deal with issues of migration. To also say that we can actually come together to tackle climate change, to tackle the environment, to work with others to look at what happens in Africa, to tackle poverty, and to do all of those things together. Isn't that a confident country? A country that knows its purpose, knows where it is, and isn't that an optimistic view of the future rather than say let's abandon that and be an offshore island to the rest of Europe? That's not the sort of country that I want to be a part of. Thank you very much indeed.
Nigel Farage, did you agree with any of that?
Well, I mean, look, you can take views on international cooperation, and Vernon, I'd be absolutely say to you that we are already at the forefront of NATO, already at the forefront of the World Bank. There are many, international institutions that we're at the forefront of. But please don't give me Africa. Please do not give me Africa. The one thing that has damaged black Africa more than anywhere else in the world is the European Union by putting massive tariff barriers on their agricultural products so they can't sell their stuff to us, and by raping and pillaging their seas through the common fisheries policy. So don't give me Africa. But one question I'm going to ask you. You said to this audience at the beginning, you were proud that we could be an independent country within the EU. You then talked later about us being a sovereign country and pooling that sovereignty. Either you're pregnant or you're not. Either you have sovereignty or you don't. And I'm sorry, we can argue the economics of it, and let's do that. But surely you have to agree with me, if you're a member of the European Union, you cannot be an independent country, because you have signed away supremacy of Parliament, supremacy of law, and supremacy of courts to another set of institutions.
I don't agree with that at all.
Well, it's a fact.
I don't agree. Well, you can assert it as a fact, but it doesn't mean I have to agree with it. But the point I'm making to people, and the point I'm saying is, as a sovereign country, we choose to join with others to tackle common problems. We can, and that's the point you're making, Nigel, and it's for you to defend that. It's perfectly reasonable for you to turn around and say, we don't want to do that. We want to act independently. We want to actually be that sort of country. I'm saying you can be both sovereign and choose to use that sovereignty to say it's better to work with others to tackle and achieve common things. And that's all I'm saying.
No, I want to work with other people, cooperate with other people.
You just said you want to be independent.
I want to work together and cooperate together. It's called international cooperation. It's something actually as a country that we're rather good at. My point to you is this. When we signed up to the Treaty, it's going to be boring, I know, but the Treaty of Rome, all those years ago, we signed up to the supremacy of law. The highest lawmaking authority of our land is not our own Supreme Court. It is the European Court of Justice, and surely you must accept that as being a fact. So you don't accept the treaties.
I'm not going to accept the assertion that you're making, which is
it's not an assertion.
No, it's an assertion that you're making.
No, it's not.
You can interrupt if you want. I'm just saying you're making an assertion that sovereignty means that we have to stand independent away from all this. I'm saying to you, my concept of sovereignty is where we choose, as an independent nation, to work with others through the European Union to achieve common goals. And I'm saying, as a result of that, we can achieve more and do more together. And we can choose, because that's what you're arguing now. We're going to have a referendum in a few weeks' time, where the people of the UK, including in Northern Ireland, will be able to choose whether they want your version of sovereignty or my version of it. But don't assert that I'm wrong and you're right.
Well, all I'm saying is that if you read the treaties and if you listen to any legal judgment, it is perfectly clear that the supremacy of law rests with the European Union, and therefore we're not involved in something that could be described as international cooperation. We're involved in something where, rather than making decisions together, you and I could be France and Germany, we could agree to do something. Actually what we're doing is handing that decision-making power away to another set of institutions, chiefly the European Commission, who we can't elect and we can't fire. And that's my fundamental problem with this. Quite frankly, if we vote to leave this union, and I very much hope we do, I believe other countries will follow in short order. And if what we get from this is a Council of Europe, as we had back in the late 1940s, where as neighbours we sit round the table and we agree cross-border crime, pollution, all of those things need cooperation to be dealt with, I'll be delighted. I want to live and work in a Europe of cooperation, but not one of centralised power with a fundamental lack of democracy.
Back to the 40s is the future that you're putting before all these people.
Do you know something? I go back further than that. I go back to the very basic principles. No, I go back to ancient Greece. Ancient Greece invented something called democracy. It was a system by which we vote for people who have manifestos, and we can then sack people. And what we've done is to sign ourselves up to an organisation. Do you know, whatever you do in this room, whatever Vernon does, We cannot change a single European law. The British Parliament, the British government cannot change a single European law because we've given the ability to make that law to an unelected bureaucracy. And that is at the heart of what is wrong with this European project and why opposition to the EU as it currently is isn't just in Britain, it's now right across the continent.
But we've chosen our path. And we can choose it or we can unchoose it. And that's the sovereignty that we're exercising. And all I'm saying is that as a sovereign country, we have chosen to work with others through the European Union to achieve more, to get access to the single market, to get access to international cooperation to deal with common problems across Europe and across the world. And we choose to do it. And that's the exercise of democracy. You can have your view of sovereignty, and you can say that, and I can have my view of sovereignty. And those two views of it will clash. And in the end, the referendum will determine which of those people want.
You were against the referendum, of course, weren't you?
What? I was against loads of things 30 years ago.
No, I mean, no. I mean, the general election last May, you were against the referendum, weren't you?
What was the referendum?
Labour Party policy was not to give us a referendum.
Well, we were but the fact of the matter is, we have a referendum now.
We do.
We have a referendum. We have a referendum. We have a referendum which is before the country now, and the choice will be made in a few weeks' time, and we will see where we get to with that.
Can we bring this a little bit closer to home, gentlemen? We are the only part of the UK which shares a land border with the European Union. Nigel Farage, what would that border look like if you get your way?
Mercifully, Ireland is not part of Schengen. If Ireland was part of Schengen, we would have a very real problem. But sensibly, Ireland has opted out of Schengen, and incidentally, I think by the looks of it, lots of countries are currently opting out of Schengen, including Austria and Hungary, and goodness knows who else. And look, we've had for, 95 years? For 95 years, we've had the free movement of people because of our, though difficult, shared history between Ireland and the United Kingdom, and there is no reason why that should, unless Ireland was to join Schengen, which I can't imagine it doing, things will continue pretty much as they are now.
What would it look like? Would you have to show your passport? Would you have customs control?
Well, I've just explained that. If Ireland was to join Schengen, to make that fundamental error, I don't believe it. I don't believe for a moment that anyone in Dublin is going to do that. If Ireland joined Schengen, then we would need to have passport controls. Ireland has not joined Schengen, therefore I see no difficulty in things carrying on exactly as they are today.
Exactly, the soft border that we have?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Vernon Coaker?
Well, I think that again, Nigel asserts that, but I think from the people I've spoken to, there's very real concern about what actually happens with respect to the border, because the issue, for obvious reasons, the border has particular connotations and particular realities with respect to the whole island of Ireland. But it ceases to become a border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, between North and South. It becomes a border between the UK outside of the EU and the rest of the EU. And you can say, oh, well, it won't make any difference, but how will that then work? Nigel's against, let me just say this, Nigel's against free movement of people. I mean, we'll no doubt get onto immigration and free movement. Well, you're either for free movement or you're against. If you're against free movement, which Nigel is, and the EU border is the border between North and South, how's that going to work? And again, well, Nigel can say, oh, well, it won't matter, nothing will change, it'll all be the same. And I don't for 1 minute expect there to be, return to what we saw before. But it does raise genuine questions about people moving across the border, and it raises genuine questions about goods moving across, and people who work in the north and live in the north and work in the south, and vice versa.
Vernon, we've been doing this since just after the First World War. We've had this loose border, as Mark put it. As I say, I repeat the point. Ireland has not made the calamitous mistake. It joined the euro, which is a very big mistake, but it hasn't made the mistake of joining Schengen. But the issue of border controls is going to be a fundamental question in this referendum. The first 20 years or so into the common market, and I worked for French companies. I spent a lot of time in Germany doing business, and the first 20 years or so, the fact we had free movement between a group of countries of roughly similar wealth, of very similar education standards, of very similar healthcare and social provision, meant that actually there weren't great flows of people. There was no economic imperative to move from France to Germany or vice versa. The problem that we've had is the EU Mr. Blair actually, above all, made a fundamental mistake by letting into the European Union 10 former communist countries who were very, very much poorer than all of us in the north. And what it's led to migratory flows into Britain that, frankly, we cannot cope with. You know, whether we're talking about the health system or the education system or the driving down of wages, and what we're saying is the British passport, you know, the British passport, which in theory 65 million people have, has now been extended to 508 million people, and we need to get back a grip and a degree of control.
Well, as I say, the question is, if you're against the freedom of movement, what does that mean for the border?
We've been doing this with Ireland for 95 years. Our relationship with Ireland will continue unaffected. Ireland is not Romania. It's a very,
asserting
very
it doesn't mean
different.
it's true. Asserting it doesn't mean it's true.
Well, nobody has suggested.
I mean, you just assert it as facts. I mean, people are genuinely concerned
Nobody
about
is
it.
suggesting we get rid of an arrangement we've had since the early 1920s.
But
nobody,
it
other than
becomes
you.
it becomes
and
a-
you're scaremongering now, aren't you?
Scaremongering. I'm asking
are.
you to answer the question.
You're trying to put. You're trying to say that those of us on this side would renege on something that's
saying
been
you'd
going
renege
on
on
for nearly a
anything.
century. We're not even going to consider
I'm
it.
not saying you'd renege on something. I'm just asking the question as a rhetorical question. If the border between the north and the south becomes a border between the EU and a non-EU nation, as the UK would become, what will that actually mean?
Well, it's already a border between a Eurozone country and a non-Eurozone country.
But
It really
you've got
won't make
somebody-
much difference,
Well,
will
I
it?
think you will be fine when you go and talk to people, and no doubt you do, in Northern Ireland, talk to your friends and colleagues here as I do. There is genuine concern about what it will actually mean. And just saying it won't, nothing will change, doesn't do
Well,
it.
if Ireland was in Schengen,
Doesn't
there'd be
do
a
it.
problem. But
It's
it's
an
not in
assertion.
Schengen.
It's
It's
an
not in
assertion.
Schengen. Things will continue exactly as they are. Don't try and scare people. There's no
I'm
need.
just asking a question.
Oh, speaking of talking to people, Alex Kane is somewhere in the room, the political commentator. Either on this subject, Alex, or if you want to widen it out, have you a question for our two guest speakers?
Oh, I didn't get one though. Thanks, Mark. My own gut instinct, I mean, I own cards on the table, I will be voting to leave, but that's not to do with this issue. But in terms of the debate, I don't believe that millions of people are going to be swayed one way or another by this constant batting of figures and statistics and definitions of sovereignty and so on. What we've had starting this evening is this either, either, neither, neither conversation where you both fundamentally disagree, don't even begin to say, well, maybe you've got a point here. I think for millions of people, and particularly the key, maybe 15 to 20% who will swing this vote, it's much more visceral and emotional than that. So what I'd like to ask both of you is, what do you think for both sides, your own side, the Remain side and the Leave side, what are the key emotional triggers in all of this? Because it's not going to be one, as I say, by fishing policy or farming subsidy. It's going to be something much more fundamental and internal for millions of people.
Well, look, I mean, first of all, I do think people, Alex, will be interested to know the consequences potentially for jobs, for subsidies and so on and so forth. But I take the point because in the end you will get a battle of statistics around that, and I understand that, although people will want to know what it might mean. But in my opening remarks, what did I say? I talked about the young people here and the need for the positive case to be made, and that's why I made the case for the pooling of sovereignty, for countries that come together through because that's what they decide to do, to work together to try and deal with common problems. And that's what I said. So I think the UK, working with the European Union, can work with those countries and look at what it does about climate change, about what it does about the environment, about some of the issues that we see around the movements of people. And that sort of vision, where we say we do better when we stand together rather than when we stand apart, is what that vision of Europe is that I actually have. And I said that in my opening remarks because that's what I think is really important. That gut emotion that says to people, we will work together to overcome those goals, I think in the end moves people as well, because they understand that together you're stronger.
What this is about, and the visceral point that you raise, what this is about is our identity. Do we want to be an independent, self-governing nation who believes we're good enough? Because I listened to Nick Clegg when I debated him in 2014, and indeed the Prime Minister and Miliband last year, and they keep saying Britain isn't big enough, Britain isn't strong enough to stand on its own 2 feet and negotiate with the rest of the world. And I think what they mean is that they don't think Britain's good enough that the United Kingdom is good enough to stand on its own 2 feet and do these things. And I believe this referendum is, what'll win it for our side if we win will be a feeling of self-confidence that we're good enough to make our own laws, have our own Supreme Court, make our own trade deals. And actually, we're not leaving Europe, we're leaving political union to give ourselves bigger, greater opportunities in the rest of the world.
And Nigel, what about Alex's wider point at the start, which was, is there not part of you that kind of agrees a little bit with Vernon, that is a little bit of a leap in the dark? Yes, we were independent 40 years. I mean, is there nothing that you can...
I think the leap in the dark is staying in. Because look, whatever cam sham of a deal is, the fact is they are going in Brussels full pelt to an even deeper model of integration with a big expansionist agenda. So they want Turkey to join the European Union within 5 years, and that will be a very different Turkey to the one that we've got now.
Okay.
They've got a growing military policy, the European armies around. So actually, it's just as uncertain what will happen to Britain if we stay in as if we come out.
But the general point was, do you not accept anything of what Vernon...
What I accept wholly is that if neighbours live in a street, it's best to get on with each other.
Yeah.
It's best to have a good residents' association and agree how we deal with litter and kids making noise at night. And I am totally for European cooperation. But the European Union model doesn't represent cooperation. It actually represents giving away your ability to make these decisions to somebody else. And that's the problem with it.
And the same question to you, Vernon. It's
Well,
not black and white, is it?
What I wouldn't question about Nigel is that he believes genuinely that what he's arguing for, and that's democracy. That's about a view of that. So I understand perfectly that Nigel puts forward the things that he's putting forward, and with passion and belief and all of those things. I just have a different view of what sovereignty means, and a different view of the future, and a different view of the world. I'd never question Nigel's, patriotism, his pride in the country. I have exactly the same things.
But it's wider than Nigel. Alex's point, if I'm right, Alex, I'm doing all the speaking for you. You hear, you're a politician, you hear these arguments, you think, he may have a point here, but people are just so scared of giving any ground whatsoever, and that we maybe need a more mature debate.
Well, we've both, in that sense, given ground in the sense that we said these are competing visions of our country. I mean, the reality of a democracy and the reality of what's happening is this is a clash of view.
Yeah.
It is, and that's a good thing. People out there in the audience here, as well as those who'll see it later online, will listen to what Nigel says and to what I say and what people say, and will come to a view of it. And that's right, and that's why I want to articulate the view that I've got about a confident UK within a confident EU.
A bit of self-indulgence. I'd be very interested to hear from Alex, why, just in a sentence, why you're voting to come out. You don't have a microphone, I'll come over and talk to you. And then I want another question from the floor. In a sentence.
I wasn't expecting you to ask me this. It goes back to 75, it goes back. I voted against in 1975 because my gut instinct at that moment was that we were building something which wasn't just a neighbourhood association. It was going to be something much bigger than that. It would lead to collective foreign policy, it would lead to collective political policy, it would lead to a stage in which a United States of Europe would be toe-to-toe, nose-to-nose with other superpowers. And I just said, if you're going to do that, Vernon, I think you have to be honest and say to people, this is where we're going. You can't, I really don't believe you can do this.
Well, as I say, I am being honest. I mean, the United States of Europe is not what people who want to be a part of the European Union are. After Alex, we want it's a cooperation between sovereign nations that choose to work together in order to achieve common goals.
But nobody in Brussels pretends that, Vernon. Nobody in Brussels. I mean, I'm there every week. What they're talking about there is a strengthened foreign policy, and a European army as quickly as possible, and an expanded European... Bosnia applied to join just 2 weeks ago, and Merkel wants Turkey in within 5 years. We're not voting to stay in the European Union as it is today. This is a deeply integrationist project, it's power mad, and yes, of course they want a full United States of Europe. And
No, they don't.
Well, I'm sorry, but you can't... we've had this. Your predecessor, Peter Hain, who of course did a spell in Northern Ireland too.
Again. I mean,
the day the European Union launched its constitution in 2005, right? I was at the press conference. Giscard d'Estaing held up the European constitution and said, with this document, the EU becomes a global superpower. And on the very same day, Peter Hain was the Labour Europe Minister, told the House of Commons that the document was a mere tidying up exercise. And I think one of the problems in this country, and the older generation in this room will know it, is that we were lied to about the common market back in 1975, when it was always intended to be political. And now you're not being straight with people about the aspirations of the European Union.
No.
They want a full state. Of that there is no question. And Vernon, I don't want us to be tied into an expansionist union with an aggressive foreign policy and an army. I actually view that, far from being good for global peace, as potentially being a threat to
I'm
it.
disappointed that you said I wasn't being straight with people. The fact you don't agree with me doesn't mean I'm not being straight with people. I'm just saying what I think is the truth. I would never say you're not being straight with people.
When were you last?
Now you're interrupting. So just sort of.
When were you last in
Now
Brussels?
you're interrupting. Now you're interrupting. All I'm saying is I would never accuse you of not being straight with people. You say what you think, and that's fine. I also say what I think. I think the idea that people want to create a United States of Europe is something you can hold up there and you'll get a few people clapping and cheering and stomping on the street. But in speaking to the people of the country, if you want arguments that work with the majority of people, it's about saying to people, we work better together when we work with other countries to achieve common goals. And that's what the European Union is doing, as it did with Iran and has done with Russia and is doing with others as well.
But Vernon, the last official document on this was called the Five Presidents' Report, the big bosses of the European Union's report last year, in which they make it clear they want common European taxation, a common European treasury, a common European army, and a single foreign policy for every country.
Well, I've read all sorts of documents saying all sorts of things. It doesn't mean they're going to happen.
If you add that to the fact that it already has supremacy of law, it already has a flag, it already has an anthem, to deny it's a state.
Straight bananas in a minute.
To deny it's a state. I'm sorry.
Straight bananas.
As soon as flags and
Straight bananas. You can't. Pounds and ounces.
We'll take a
Pounds
quick
and
question
ounces.
from the floor.
Yeah, that's where university, we have the student union there and he wants to ask a question.
Hi, my name is Vernon Coaker. I'm from the National Union of Students. Tertiary education in Northern Ireland over the last number of years has come under increasing pressure financially. I guess from my perspective, we see from Europe, for instance, the campus we're on this evening has received significant amounts of money for its redevelopment in the middle of a funding crisis in Northern Ireland in terms of funding for tertiary education, in terms of mobility for Erasmus students, for example, etc. There are lots of different opportunities there. We have significant concerns about what leaving Europe could have for those things, and I guess I'd like you to address those concerns.
No.
In rough terms, I mean, in simple terms, we put £20 billion a year in, and we get £10 billion a year back. You know, I mean, give or take $1 billion here, $1 billion there. And soon you're talking real money. If you want the precise figures, we put in 19 and last year net cost us 8.9. All right, but that's very boring. So it's 2 for 1. Do you know, most of the money, or the biggest lump of money that comes back to this country, comes back in the form of agricultural subsidy, all right? And there's no debate or even question about that changing. The rest of the money that comes back, a lot has come back into universities, a lot has come back into research projects, and that's no bad thing. I worry ever so slightly that some of the money that's come back has come back to fund Monet professorships in universities, which I find really quite deeply worrying, but hey, in money terms, that's a relatively small amount. You know, even if we maintained every project that the European Union spent of our money back in this country, we'd still be better off by £9 billion every single year. And that actually, you know, when you think about a government that is struggling to get down the annual deficit, is a very significant sum of money.
Vernon?
Well, just to say on that, I mean, the Nigel comes up with a net figure, but of course that misses out all of the benefits that we get from European membership in terms of jobs, in terms of investment, in terms of growth, all of those things. And if you add those things in, as the CBI said, it actually shows that we benefit considerably from being members of the European Union. But specifically in answer to the point, I mean, we're in a building that was built with a 250 million, I think it was, loan from Europe. That's one example. I was at the Science Park in the Titanic Quarter last week and seeing their money that had been spent that Queen's University were using with respect to the research centre and the research hub that they've got there, seeing students from all over Europe, and the concerns that Queen's University had about that future investment, but also about what it meant between students moving between different countries in the EU. And I think, therefore, there are very real question marks. Nigel will say it's scaremongering, but I think there are real questions to be asked about what are the consequences for students moving across Europe. What will happen should we come out of the EU? And as I say, my own view of this is that the Leave campaign, whichever version you want to look at, what they basically resort to is basically saying, well, don't worry, it'll be all right on the night. And Nigel will say, well, don't worry, it's not going to happen. It won't be a problem.
Well, what I'm saying is we are massive. There's a lot of money comes back to Britain. 50% of what we give comes back, right? But it comes back to be spent in ways that they determine, not we determine. So a university makes an application. A charity can make an application, whatever it may be. My point is, if every project we had was currently maintained exactly as it is, we would still be better off as a country to the tune net of £9 billion a year. And Vernon talks about jobs and growth and benefits. Do you know China now exports to the European Union, I think last year, 300 billion euros worth of goods. America last year sold 200 billion euros worth of goods. They're not members of the EU. They're not part of the single market. They trade with the single market. And that's what we're saying. What we're saying is we want trade with the single market, but we want to be free to do our own trade deals with the Commonwealth and the rest of the world.
Okay, Vernon, we'll let you come back very quickly if you can.
Well, it's only just to say that just for Alex and one or two other people, I agree that China and America are important trade partners for the UK. All I'm saying is that why would you not continue to trade with them and cut your nose off with respect to the 500 million people who live in the European Union and trade with them as well?
Okay. We're going to have a quick fire round. I'll give you both a bite of the cherry on these. I've got 3 questions at least. The first one.
It's the name of the Conservative Party of Ireland. Question to Mr. Farage. The No campaign keeps holding up Norway as a classic example of a separate country trading with Europe, I'd say the EU. Do you not concede the fact that the only reason why Norway is allowed to trade with Europe is because they have to abide by the rules that the EU makes? Let me finish, please. And the fact of the matter is that was that not happen in the UK? A week about 23rd June, and the supplementary question is, you choose the yes campaign of scaremongering. Are you not scaremongering by saying that if we join the EU, there's going to be less to Europe, when there's no evidence of that at the moment?
Well, Norway is, can I just say, the only person that talks about Norway is Mr. Cameron. We've never said we want to be like Norway. How could we? They're a country of 5 million people. We're a country of at least 65 million. And the great lie, that you swallowed.
It's not a lie, it's not a lie.
And the great lie that the Labour Party collectively seem to have swallowed from the Prime Minister is this bizarre concept that Norway has to obey all the rules and has no say.
So it does.
Does it?
Yes,
Well, let me just tell you something, all right? A simple fact of life. If we sell a good to America or anywhere in the world, we have to obey their specifications. And so it is for Norway. And between 2000 and 2015, Norway adopted into its law 9% of EU single market rules. So this idea, they have to abide by all the rules, is complete and utter factual baloney. But look, we're not Norway. We're not, just one more quick thing. We are not Norway. Norway is a member of the European Economic Area. I don't want us to do that. I want us to have our own unique British deal with the European Union. We are their biggest export market in the world. They need us very badly.
Okay, gents, get your pens out. We've only got a couple of quick questions.
Right,
and we'll
sorry.
give you all a chance, including Vernon first.
Hi, thanks. John McQueen. I run the British Irish Chamber of Commerce. It's great to meet you all. The UK pays, as Nigel said, less than 10 million a year to be part of the free market, free movement, free goods and services transmission right across Europe. And the UK, Britain, pays more than 10 million a year to support Northern Ireland for free trade, free movement of people, goods and services, etc. And they're not both great bargains.
Well, as I say, I mean, thank you for the question. I mean, I think we do get an awful lot, from being members of the EU, and I think what Nigel categorises that is you pay X in, and then comes back and then talks about the net contribution, and therefore there's billions of pounds that could be available. And the frank reality is that for business, for jobs, for growth, for investment, access to that single market is absolutely fundamental and crucial. And the idea, as Nigel says, that we could leave and it would be all right on the night. Don't worry, there wouldn't be any consequence. We could just organise and come to all the arrangements that we've done before. And as was said before, Norway is a huge contributor to the EU. It has to accept free movement of people in order to gain, and the regulations in order to gain access to the market in the EU. And that's exactly what would happen to Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK if it came out.
Thank you for such a short answer. That's a quick one.
We can do a whole lot better than this. We can do a whole lot better than this because being part of a political union, we're now prohibited from making our own trade deals, our own arrangements with the emerging economies in the world. Do not think of Britain's future economically as being European. It's not. It's got to be global. And to succeed with that, we need the freedom to act ourselves. We haven't got that in the EU.
Colin Anderson of Anderson Spratt Group. Nigel, if I could ask, the one certain feeling I have at the moment is uncertainty, listening to what is taking place tonight. The one thing that I would like to ask, as Northern Ireland rebuilds itself, and we're looking towards job creation as well as job attraction, and we've done quite well with attracting jobs here over the past number of years. If we come out of the European Union, are we not saying to any potential investor, just go to the Republic of Ireland rather than coming here?
Well, that, Colin, is exactly the argument most of the people that are heading up the Remain campaign made 15 years ago. Do you remember? If Britain doesn't join the euro, we're sunk. We're dead meat. Foreign and direct investment will dry up. Jobs won't be attracted. Oh, the Labour Party were there. I mean, absolutely
We objected to the
full
euro.
guns blazing. Tony Blair, Lord Mandelson, Uncle Tom Cobley and all.
Rhetorical drivel.
And this, of course, was the Labour Party policy up until that 97 election. So the same people who made those arguments about the euro, they were wrong then and they're wrong now. Vernon talked about the number of Irish companies and Northern Irish companies that trade not just with each other, but with the EU. 95% of companies registered in the United Kingdom do not trade with the European Union. And the problem is, the rule book we have to adopt applies to all companies, be they big or small. And my argument is, by being outside of this over-regulated club, we can actually give our small and medium-sized enterprises an even break, and that, I believe, would create more jobs.
Well, the truth of the matter, as Colin said, is that foreign direct investment would be put at risk. What is one of the big things that the Northern Ireland Executive negotiated with the UK government is that from April 2018, corporation tax between North and South could be equalised. And the reason for that was that because of trying to make sure that foreign direct investment, that Northern Ireland and North Ireland was as attractive as the Republic for that foreign direct investment. If Northern Ireland and the UK leave the EU, that advantage is potentially swept away. So there are very real disadvantages for that. Let me just say on the euro, we objected strongly to it. We didn't join the euro for the very reasons. That is a country which is independent and sovereign, acting in its own interests within the European Union where it chooses to do so. And that's what we did with the euro, and that's what we'll do with other decisions that impact on us. It's in our interest to stay in for all sorts of reasons around jobs, but also for foreign direct investment as well.
Very quick question.
I just want to mention to Nigel, Vernon has already mentioned the amount of money that's going into education here, and that's going into education in Europe. And my daughter is at Galway University, and I'm very glad that she is. She's getting a great education. But it doesn't really matter, Nigel, what you're saying, because the thousands of women like me who are going to vote to stay in Europe at the referendum are going to be voting on the millions of euros that have gone into peace building, that have gone into women's health programmes, that have gone into suicide prevention in Northern Ireland. And those are the realities of life, and that's where I'll be voting.
Well, you're entitled to do that. But I mean, the point I'm making is all this wonderful money that people keep talking about, it's our money. It's our money that goes to Brussels, gets recycled, and we get half of it back, only to be spent in ways that they choose. And I think we're actually perfectly capable and civilised as a nation to look after our own people and spend our own money wisely.
Vernon, very quickly.
Well, I just think, again, it goes back to the point. Again, it's a contrasting view of Europe. What all Nigel's doing is saying we put this amount in and we get that amount back. Whereas I'm saying that what actually happens is we pay a contribution to be a part of the European Union. That gives us huge benefits in terms of jobs, in terms of investment, in terms of growth. And then alongside that, there are investments made into various activities, including the ones that have just been mentioned. And as I say, again, it goes back time and time again, and people will have to come to a view about this. A proud, strong, independent UK operating within the European Union in a way where people see collective action as being a more powerful way of moving forward than countries standing alone.
Okay, gents, we're entering the final lap. I've got about 9 minutes left because we have to finish at 7 o'clock on the dot. Do you understand there are some people at the back with questions? So if you can write a couple of these down, you obviously need to answer them all as quick as possible.
Just for both people this evening, we've had a series of last summer racist attacks in Belfast, where people who have chosen to make Northern Ireland their home and to work and live here and play their part in society have had their homes attacked. I'm concerned that this referendum is going to become a dog whistle campaign where immigration becomes the secret issue, where people are made to feel unwelcome when they've chosen to come here to make this place their home. What are both of you going to do to make sure that that kind of disgraceful politics is kept out of this?
Okay, well, we've got one more at the front here before we go.
How big a problem is immigration, and how do you think that affects young people in Northern Ireland?
There's a theme. Deirdre?
I don't want to drag this on any of you in particular, but Vernon said earlier that you're either for free movement or you're against free movement. I just want to know what happened to Labour's British jobs, British workers.
Okay, we'll just take one. Sorry about my eyesight here. We'll take this one here.
I just have a quick question about bilateral trade agreements. So we trade as a bloc with Europe. If that disappears, if we vote to leave, how long will it take to set up trade agreements again with China, America, the rest of Europe, and what do you do in that gap?
Okay, that's probably enough to be getting on with. Is anyone absolutely desperate? Okay.
We're going to get past 7 o'clock.
Sorry, this is just about immigration, and obviously I'm not from here, but I'm very much affected by immigration policy in the UK. But the thing that's a bit frustrating for me is that all of this talk about tens of thousands of net migration is actually really affecting the people from outside the EU because it's the only type of migration that can be controlled. So I want to ask to Vernon, can you explain how staying in the EU is a benefit to me when that policy is in place? And I get the impression that after this election, people aren't going to suddenly see migration from inside the EU as being all of a sudden a good thing. So I want to know how you would address that.
Immigration. Vernon, you go first.
Well, first of all, I think it's just that it's really important, and I think the dog whistle point is really important, that whatever you view, that it's done in a calm, reasonable, responsible way. And so, let me say this, immigration is conflated. So you get asylum, immigration, migration is all wrapped up into one thing, and free movement. And I think that sometimes it'd be helpful to pull that out. So let me say this. I think that immigration and free movement and asylum is something that the UK can be proud of. That actually the traditions of our country to welcome people, to actually bring people in, I think is something we should never ever lose. And to see us accepting people fleeing war and persecution is fantastic. And we should recognise that and continue to, I think.
Okay. 200 countries in the world have sensible immigration policies. They decide who comes into their countries and on what terms. I want us to have an Australian-style point system where we don't discriminate against people in the rest of the world. We say, if you're an Indian, whether you come from India or Romania, we'll choose you on your merit, not on your race or your nationality, which is what we're currently doing. And we cannot control the numbers that come into Britain if we remain a member of the European Union. And the impact of this on jobs, youth unemployment, in Northern Ireland is much higher than it is in many other parts of the United Kingdom. The argument is having an open door to unlimited, cheap, unskilled labour is not good for British families.
Well, there you go about dog whistles. Start talking about open door.
Well, you're
people
Labour.
pouring
You're
in,
the Labour
all of
Party.
those things. That does not help a
changed this
rational,
country.
sensible argument.
Blair changed this
Open
country
door,
fundamentally
using language like that
and
does not help.
damaged the income of
Open
ordinary
door does
people
not
in
help.
Britain. And it was an irresponsible and silly thing to have done.
Open
Let's
door is
be like
inflammatory.
Australia.
Open
Let's be
door
like
is
Australia.
inflammatory.
Okay, and we're nearly done. And Naomi's question was more about
Bilateral. Was that? Sorry, was it?
Yeah, it was more about the nuts and bolts. I think, wasn't it? It was about. I mean, okay, we vote out in
Trade. Right. Very quickly. China and the USA do vast amounts of trade with the single market without a trade deal at all. They purely rely on World Trade Organization rules. Cameron yesterday said it would take us 10 years to sort out our trade arrangements. Do you know the Australians sorted out their trade deal with the USA from start to finish in 10 months? It's back to my point about confidence. If Australia's good enough to make its own trade deals globally, then do you know what? We're good enough as well. That's exactly what we should do.
The truth is that Nigel has no idea how long it will take to negotiate bilateral trade deals. He has no idea at all.
More idea than the Labour Party do.
You can assert what you want, but the reality is that by and large, that if you look at Switzerland, it took years to negotiate trade deals with the European Union. Who knows what's going to happen? Nigel says that's scaremongering. I say you have to be able to point to the facts. You have to be able to point to what actually the UK will look like outside of the EU, rather than just maybes, mightbe's, and it'll be all right on the night. We know for certain that there are issues within the EU that need to be resolved, but we also know that by and large we get a good deal out of it. We cooperate, it creates jobs, it creates wealth, it creates investment, and people cooperating to deal with common problems. That's the sort of country I want to live in, and that's the sort of Europe I want as well.
Vernon, one last question. I've got 20 quid in my pocket. Should I go down to the bookies and put my money on Remain? Are you that confident? Would you advise me?
I think in the end, without being complacent about it, I think Remain will win. But I think Nigel will say that he's confident. In the end, it's debates like this, and I think the university is to be congratulated for that. I think it's debates like this, discussions like that, where you let the real, this is democracy, this is sovereignty in action, and who knows? I hope that if you put £20 on it, that
would
that
you
would
advise me if I went into your constituency on Saturday morning and said, I've got a problem, I need money?
Can I just have a look at the odds first? But,
well, I can help you with that.
But seriously, yes, I put £20 on and you'll get money back.
I can help you with that.
Put £20 on and you will get money back.
I can help you with that. My next debate I'm doing is on Thursday night in Westminster, and it's sponsored by Ladbrokes.
Is it?
Okay. No, it really is. And the betting market says that if you want to put 20 quid on Britain to leave, you'll probably get 2 to 1. So the bookmakers at the moment think the establishment will win. But remember, the day before the general election last year, you could have got 13 to 2 against the Tory majority.
Oh, here we go.
I bet not. I bet 20 quid. Well, I had 20 quid, Nigel. I bet you 20 quid, but I only got 5 or so.
I tell you what, Vernon, I'll take 2 to 1, mate. If you're giving me 2 to 1, that's a very good price.
I'll do it up.
Do I hear 2 to 1?
I've got 20 quid in my jacket. I'll give you 20
2 to 1, no tax, it's a bet. Okay.
And it's a 2 to 1? 2 to 1?
Yep.
No tax?
No tax. Well, as long as that's legal.
Just.
Could you shake hands on that? Thank you both very much.
He's got the book, mate.
Thank you for all your questions. It's great to see passion about politics, which isn't the traditional politics here in Belfast. So thank you all for your questions and for your participation. Connor is going to finish.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.